The Formula One season 1990 was contested over a 16-race series that commenced on the 11th of March and ended on the 4th of November. About calendar, there were some changes for this season, as the United States Grand Prix was moved from June to March to become the first round, while the Brazilian Grand Prix was returned to the Interlagos circuit for the first time since 1980, with a shorter track layout after a major renovation of the facility, and the Canadian Grand Prix was moved to be before the Mexican Grand Prix. The first race of the year was held on an angular street circuit in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, and the race became the season opener so it could be held in cooler and much more pleasant weather, avoiding the 40 degrees Celsius heat that made conditions very difficult at the previous race in Phoenix, which took place in June 1989. Unexpected rain in qualifying led to a grid with Gerhard Berger on pole position, with Pierluigi Martini second in the Minardi, Andrea de Cesaris third in the Dallara, Jean Alesi fourth in the Tyrrell, Ayrton Senna down in fifth and Nelson Piquet sixth. Alesi took the lead at the start ahead of Berger, de Cesaris, Senna, Martini and Piquet. Alesi pulled away and Berger was dropping back Senna past de Cesaris. Berger hit a wall on lap 9, forcing him to pit. He charged back but later retired with clutch problems. Alesi was 8.2 seconds ahead, but Senna started to reel him in. Senna attacked on lap 34, but Alesi defended and kept the lead. Senna overtook Alesi one lap later and pulled away to win. Both Ferraris retired, with Alain Prost retiring on lap 21 with an oil leak and Nigel Mansell on lap 49 with clutch problems. After that, Thierry Boutsen passed Piquet to take third, with Stefano Modina's Brabham and Satoru Nakajima's Tyrrell getting the final points. The Brazilian Grand Prix had returned to the Interlagos Autodrome in São Paulo for the first time since 1980, having been at the Jacarapagua Rio Centro Autodrome in Rio de Janeiro for 9 previous seasons consecutively, and 1978, and the circuit had been shortened. During qualifying, Senna and Berger were 1-2 with Boutsen and Patrese 3-4 and the Ferraris of Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost behind them. At the start, Senna led Berger, Boutsen, Prost, Patrese and Mansell. Boutsen passed Berger early on but could not keep up with Senna. At the stops, Boutsen ran into a tyre and had to change his nose cone, dropping back to 11th, and some good work from the Ferrari crew got Prost ahead of Berger and Mansell ahead of Patrese. Senna was ahead of Prost, Berger, Mansell, Patrese and Alesi. Senna, 10 seconds ahead of everybody, hit the back marker, former teammate Nakajima, forcing him to pit and drop back to third. With just a few laps to go, Patrese retired with a broken oil cooler. Prost won from Berger, Senna, Mansell, the recovering Boutsen and Piquet. There was a 6-week gap before the San Marino round, at the Autodromo Enzo E. Dino Ferrari in Italy. An almost identical grid to Brazil saw Senna, Berger, Patrese, Boutsen, Mansell and Prost line up after qualifying. At the start, Senna and Berger got away well, but Boutsen sliced ahead of Patrese to take third with Mansell and Prost behind. Boutsen passed Berger on lap 2. On the next lap, a stone sliced through Senna's wheel rim, spinning him into a sand trap and out of the race. Boutsen pulled away from Berger, but his engine blew on lap 18. Soon Mansell passed Patrese and then attacked Berger. Berger closed the door and Mansell spun without hitting anything nor losing a place. He set off after Berger again but retired with engine problems. At the second stops, Nannini got ahead of Prost. Patrese closed in on Berger and passed him on lap 51. Patrese pulled away and won his first Grand Prix since South Africa in 1983 from Berger, Nannini, Prost, Piquet and Alesi. In Monaco, Senna took pole but Prost was second with Alain third ahead of Patrese, Berger and Boutsen. At the start, Berger collided with Prost at Mirabeau, blocking the track and stopping the race. The second start was all right and Senna led from Prost, Alain, Berger, Patrese and Boutsen. The race settled down and nothing changed until lap 30 when Prost retired with a battery failure. Then Mansell hit the back of Boutsen and was forced to pit and changed his front wing. Patrese's distributor failed on lap 42. Behind, Mansell was charging through the field and passed Boutsen to take fourth. But then he was sidelined with the same problem as Prost. At the front, Senna won from Alain, Berger, Boutsen, Alex Caffey in the Arrows and Eric Bernard's Laris. Canada was next and at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal the McLarens were 1-2 in qualifying with Senna ahead of Berger with Prost third, Nannini fourth, Piquet fifth and Boutsen sixth. The track was damp on race day and Berger jumped the start and then hesitated. He got a 1-minute time penalty as well as allowing Senna to lead on the road. Senna led Nannini, Alain, Prost, Boutsen and Piquet. The track began to dry and everyone pitted. But when Nannini rejoined, he hit a groundhog and had to pit again for repairs. He spun off on lap 22. Berger took the lead on the road but he needed a minute to stay ahead at the end. He charged and was a second quicker than the others as Boutsen spun off while battling Prost. Senna now led from Prost, Piquet, Mansell, Patrese and Derek Warwick. Piquet after many laps finally passed Prost who was then attacked by Mansell. Patrese retired putting Berger to fifth. Mansell passed Prost and slowly pulled away. With 2 laps to go, Berger got past Prost on aggregate but could not get ahead of Mansell. Senna won from Piquet, Mansell, Berger, Prost and Warwick. After Canada came the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City and Berger qualified on pole position with Patrese beside him and Senna third, Mansell fourth, Boutsen fifth and Alain sixth. At the start, Patrese and Berger jumped Senna while Piquet got ahead of Boutsen and Mansell. Early on, Senna passed Patrese and Berger followed him through. Patrese was dropping back and Piquet got by him as well. Boutsen was the next to go through but at the same time Berger had a problem with his tyre and was forced to stop and drop to 12th position. Senna lead from Piquet, Boutsen, Patrese, Mansell and Prost. Soon, Mansell passed Patrese and got Boutsen for laps later as Prost did the same to Patrese. Prost sneaked ahead of Boutsen as Mansell closed in on Piquet. Mansell got ahead on lap 36 and Prost followed him through 6 laps later. Piquet soon stopped and dropped behind Nannini, Boutsen and Berger. Berger passed Boutsen on lap 47 and Nannini for laps later. Prost passed Mansell on lap 55 and they began to close in on Senna. Prost passed Senna followed by Mansell, then Mansell spun but at the same time Senna got a puncture that led to him retiring in the pits for laps before the end and allowing Berger to get third and close into Mansell. With a daring move Berger passed Mansell but Mansell charged back and attacked taking back second place after making an even more daring pass around the outside of Berger at the fastest corner on the track, the 180° Peraltada corner. Prost won with Mansell second making it a Ferrari 1-2 ahead of Berger, Nannini, Boutsen and Piquet. France was next, being held at the Paul Ricard. The fans were wearing red and a Ferrari did take pole position. However, it was not their hero Prost but Mansell who was ahead of Berger, Senna, Prost, Nannini and Patrese. At the start, Berger got past Mansell while Prost lost out as well. Berger led with Mansell, Senna, Nannini, Patrese and Prost behind. On lap 2, Senna passed Mansell for second and soon after Prost passed Patrese. The order stayed like that until Senna passed Berger, who had been too hard on his tyres in the early stages. Nannini and Piquet pitted early while Berger and Senna went too late. Mansell's and Prost's tyres lasted longer and thus they pitted late. Riccardo Patrese went too late and was the big loser. This left the two Leighton houses ahead with a totally shuffled order behind them. Ivan Capelli led Mauricio Gugelmin, Prost, Nannini, Mansell and Senna. Prost then caught and passed Gugelmin, who then went out with engine trouble. As Prost closed in on Capelli, Mansell in 8th place could not get by Berger, Piquet and Senna. Capelli continued to defend from Prost as Mansell went out with engine trouble. Nannini moved into 3rd but was then forced to retire with electrical trouble, while Prost finally passed Capelli with 3 laps to go. Prost won ahead of Capelli, Senna, Piquet, Berger and Patrese. Britain was next and Mansell, roared on by his home fans at the fast Silverstone airfield circuit, took pole from Senna, followed by Berger, Boutsen, Prost and Alain. Senna passed Mansell at the first corner and led for the first 11 laps before Mansell retook the lead. The Brazilian then spun on lap 14, dropping down to 5th. As Prost passed Boutsen for 3rd, Mansell began to have troubles with his gearbox. Berger passed him for the lead on lap 22 but then began to suffer handling issues, enabling Mansell to repass him on lap 28. Meanwhile, Prost closed up to both drivers, before passing Berger on lap 31 and then Mansell on lap 44 as the Englishman's gearbox issues worsened. Mansell remained second until lap 56 when his gearbox failed altogether. He promptly threw his gloves into the crowd and announced his retirement from Formula One at the end of the season. Capelli briefly ran 3rd ahead of Berger before his fuel pipe broke. Berger's race then ended for laps from home with a throttle failure. This left Prost to win by nearly 40 seconds from Boutsen, the Belgian driver in turn finishing for seconds ahead of Senna. Bernard, Piquet and Aguri Suzuki rounded out the top 6. At the very fast, forested Hockenheimering, McLarens were 1-2 in qualifying, Senna ahead of Berger. Ferraris were 3-4 with Prost ahead of Mansell and Williams with Patrese ahead of Boutsen. At the start, Berger took off better than Senna, but Senna just stayed ahead with Berger 2nd, Prost 3rd, Mansell 4th, Patrese 5th and Piquet 6th. There were no changes until lap 11 when Piquet tried to pass Patrese and went through an escape road, allowing Nannini to get ahead. 3 laps later Mansell went through the grass at Ostkurve without losing a place but damaging his car. It proved crucial as he retired 2 laps later, the damage being too great. Meanwhile, Nannini passed Patrese as the top 3 stopped for tyres, the Williamses and Benettons planning to go without a stop. Piquet retired with engine trouble. Thus, Nannini led Senna, Patrese, Piquet, Berger and Prost. On lap 34, Senna passed Nannini for the lead and pulled away. Senna won from Nannini, Berger, Prost, Patrese and Boutsen. Hungary was next, and at the Hungaroring in Mogyorad, the Williamses qualified ahead of the McLarens, Boutsen taking pole ahead of Patrese, Berger, Senna, Mansell and Alain. At the start, Boutsen kept the lead, but it was Berger who got away best and passed Patrese, while Senna was worse and lost out to both Mansell and Alain. Thus, it was Boutsen, Berger, Patrese, Mansell, Alain, and Senna. It stayed like that until lap 21, when Senna passed Alain for 5th, but he was forced to pit on the next lap with a slow puncture. Nannini soon passed Alain to take 5th. The leaders stopped and Berger was the big loser, with Nannini and Senna the big gainers, rising directly behind the Williams men. The order was Boutsen, Patrese, Nannini, Senna, Mansell and Berger. Boutsen then pulled away while Patrese held up the others until Nannini streamed by, with Senna following him. Patrese then pitted and dropped behind Piquet as Berger passed Mansell, only for Mansell to get back at him. Senna tried to pass Nannini on lap 64 and tipped Nannini into a spin and retirement. Berger tried to do the same thing on Mansell on lap 72 at the same corner, with the same result, a collision, but with both cars out. Boutsen won ahead of Senna, Piquet, Patrese, Warwick and Bernard. At the historic Spa-Francorchamps circuit, McLaren were 1-2 with Senna on pole ahead of Berger, Prost, Boutsen, Mansell and Patrese. At the start, Piquet pushed Mansell off the road and soon Nakajima and Modena collided as well, causing the race to be stopped. At the second start, Senna took the lead while Boutsen sliced into 2nd and Prost dropped to 5th. However, Paolo Barria crashed his Minardi heavily at Eau Rouge, sending debris all over the track and causing the race to be stopped again. The third start was clean and Senna took the lead ahead of Berger, Prost, Boutsen, Patrese and Nannini. On lap 11, Mansell went into the pits with handling problems. He went back out but retired 8 laps later. On lap 14, Prost sliced ahead of Berger, who then pitted for tyres. Senna and Prost, separated by 2 seconds, stopped at the same time, but then Nannini, who was planning to go without stopping, came in between them. Then both Patrese and Boutsen went out with gearbox troubles. Prost passed Nannini and Berger tried the same, but this time Nannini came back at him to keep the place. On lap 41, Nannini went wide and Berger sailed through to take 3rd. Senna duly won from Prost, Berger, Nannini, Piquet and Gugelmin. After Belgium came Italy, and at the historic Monza Autodrome near Milan, Senna took pole again with Prost 2nd, Berger 3rd, Mansell 4th, Alain 5th and Boutsen 6th. At the start, Berger raced past Prost while Alain was jumped by both the Ferraris. But Warwick crashed at the Parabolica, bringing out the red flags. In the restart, Berger got past Prost and Alain repeated his previous effort and had passed both Ferraris before the second chicane, so we had Senna leading Berger, Alain, Prost, Mansell and Boutsen. On lap 5, Alain spun off and retired. Nothing changed until lap 18, when Boutsen retired with a suspension failure and Berger's tyres began to fade. Prost then passed Berger and the stops did not change anything. The top 3 then began to battle for the lead, but none were able to close in on the other while Mansell continued to drop back, fighting a faulty throttle return spring. Senna won from Prost, Berger, Mansell, Patrese and Nakajima. In Portugal, at the Estoril circuit near Lisbon, the Ferraris took 1-2 in qualifying with Mansell ahead of Prost, Senna, Berger, Patrese and Piquet. At the start, Mansell got too much wheel spin and he slid across the track and almost took Prost out. As a result, the McLarens blasted by them, with Piquet getting by Prost as well. The order was Senna, Berger, Mansell, Piquet, Prost and Boutsen. On lap 13, Prost overtook Piquet for fourth and later Mansell went to the grass, allowing Prost to take third. Mansell and Berger pitted soon as Prost passed Senna at the same time to lead. These two soon pitted as well with a shuffled order: Senna, Mansell, Berger, Prost, Nannini and Piquet. By then, the Ferrari started to close in on the McLarens in front of them. Behind them, Piquet passed Nannini to take fifth. On lap 50, Mansell was close to Senna and passed him to lead. He pulled away fast but then hit Philippe Alliot while lapping him, pushing the Ligier into a wall while Mansell got away with no damage. Prost then passed Berger on lap 59. 2 laps later, Suzuki and Caffi collided and with the latter stuck in the cockpit in a zone with the wall next to the track, the race was stopped. Thus Mansell won from Senna, Prost, Berger, Piquet and Nannini. Qualifying in Spain, at the Jerez circuit near Seville, was marred by a serious incident involving Martin Donnelly. During a hot lap on the Friday, the Northern Irishman suffered a suspension failure on one of the fastest corners of the circuit, sending his Lotus into the barriers head-on. The car was destroyed while Donnelly was thrown across the track with his seat still strapped to his back. He suffered severe leg fractures and bruising on his brain and lungs. Remarkably, he survived, though his Formula One career was over. Senna, shaken by this incident, took his 50th career pole position ahead of Prost, Mansell, Alesi, Berger and Patrese. At the start, Senna led away from Prost, while Alesi was hit by Patrese and spun into retirement. Mansell kept up with the championship challengers, while Berger struggled on hard tyres and held up the Williams and Benettons. The pit stop saw Mansell get ahead of Prost before waving his teammate through. He did so just as Senna was emerging from his own stop. The Brazilian, realizing that he could not afford to be behind Mansell, dived ahead of him. Piquet, who had not pitted, held a narrow lead over Prost. The Frenchman pressured him into running wide on lap 29, dropping him down to fourth. He eventually retired with battery problems. Senna began to struggle with a punctured radiator, and was passed by Mansell before dropping out on lap 54. Nannini was now up to third while Boutsen and Berger disputed fourth. The two tangled on lap 57, sending Berger into retirement. Prost and Mansell duly completed a Ferrari 1-2, the Frenchman 22 seconds ahead, with Nannini, Boutsen, Patrese and Suzuki completing the top 6. Before the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, Nannini was involved in a helicopter crash, suffering a severed right forearm. Though it was reattached using microsurgery, his F1 career ended, so Benetton duly took on Eurobrun's Roberto Marino as Nannini's replacement. In qualifying, Senna took pole ahead of Prost, Mansell, Berger, Boutsen and Piquet. At the start, Prost did have the advantage and Senna drove into the Frenchman, who drove the normal racing line. Senna's left front touched Prost's rear wing, spinning both of them into the gravel trap. The World Championship was sealed. Although Senna led by 9 points and there were 9 points for a win, if Prost won the last race he would have had to drop his 5th place in Canada, which meant that he would be 2 points behind Senna even if Senna retired. Senna was the new world champion. In the race, Berger was leading Mansell, Piquet, Marino, Boutsen and Patrese. At the start of the second lap, Berger spun off into retirement after hitting debris from the Senna-Prost collision. This left Mansell, who was under pressure by the Benettons, leading. Mansell then began to pull away from Piquet and Marino as Suzuki passed Warwick for 6th. Mansell pitted with a 15-second lead on lap 27 for tyres, but his drive shaft snapped as he went out of his garage. He retired, giving the constructors' title to McLaren as they were 18 points ahead and a 1-2 could get only 15 points. The Benettons and Suzuki did not stop, but Patrese and Boutsen did, with Patrese getting ahead at the stops but both rejoined behind Suzuki. Then Nakajima passed Warwick to take 6th as Warwick then retired with gearbox trouble. Piquet won with Marino making it a Benetton 1-2. Suzuki was 3rd, Patrese 4th, Boutsen 5th and Nakajima 6th. The last race of the year was in Australia for what would be the 500th World Championship Grand Prix race, and at the Adelaide City Street circuit the McLarens took 1-2 in qualifying ahead of the Ferraris, Senna ahead of Berger, Mansell, Prost, Alain and Patrese. At the start, Senna took off into the lead with Berger defending from the Ferraris and Piquet getting by Alain and Patrese. The order was Senna, Berger, Mansell, Prost, Piquet and Alain. On lap 2, Berger accidentally hit the engine kill switch allowing Mansell to get ahead before he could bump start the McLaren. Then while defending from Prost, he held up Prost allowing Piquet to get ahead of the Frenchman. Piquet then soon passed Berger for third and the order settled down. Senna and Mansell continued to pull away from the rest, none of them able to keep up. Soon Patrese got past Alain with Boutsen following suit. Then, on lap 43, Mansell went up an escape road, giving Senna a good lead. Mansell was caught and passed by Piquet and pitted for tyres soon after. At the stops, Boutsen got ahead of Patrese. Berger then ran wide entering the Brabham Straight, allowing Prost to take third. Mansell passed Berger on lap 57 and soon passed Prost on his new tyres. Senna had a gearbox glitch on lap 62 and went straight on into the wall and retired. Mansell closed in on Piquet, breaking the lap record 3 times towards the finish, taking 2 seconds a lap out of his lead. Piquet made an error with 4 laps to go, allowing Mansell to close right up. Mansell attacked on the last lap with a desperate passing attempt at the end of the straight, was too far behind to make the pass. Thus, Piquet won from Mansell, Prost, Berger, Boutsen and Patrese. At the end of the season, Senna was world champion with 78 points with Prost second with 71.